Good afternoon, friends. This is another video in a series of GST input tax credit. As per second proviso of section 16 subsection 2 of CGST Act, if buyer who is a recipient of goods or services did not pay the value and GST charge on that value as mentioned on the invoice within 180 days from date of issue of invoice, this buyer and recipient has to reverse credit along with interest at the rate of 18% per annum. This provision is being envisaged to ensure that SME and MSME sector gets paid within this defined time period of 180 days, and condition is being created on buyer and recipient to make payment within 180 days from date of issue of invoice. Unless paid, recipient buyer has to reverse credit along with interest. Certain provisions are there. Let me tell you the provision which you must know pertaining to this topic. First, if you have made the partial payment, credit is available partially to that extent to you. And there is certain exception when this provision is not applicable, which you must know that this provision, second provision of section 16 subsection 2 is not applicable. First, if there is RCM liability, reverse charge method liability, wherein recipient need to pay GST, this provision is not applicable. Second, when we are dealing with the transaction specified in Schedule 1, and Schedule 1 for specific transaction, even without consideration, is a deemed supply, but for this provision, this is exception, no reversal required. So supply of goods or services between related person or distinct person, branch and head office or vice versa, in the course of furtherance of business is a deemed supply, but the payment criteria is not important and this provision is not applicable. Third situation, when supplier is liable but incurred by the recipient. So FOC supplies made by recipient or customer, buyer, to the supplier for such contract where supplier is liable but incurred by the recipient. And this provision of valuation coming under section 15 subsection 2 clause B. In such cases, the second provision of section 16 subsection 2 is not applicable. 4. Credit note. You have seen in the trade that supplier supplying goods, let's say at 100 rupees, and subsequently issuing a credit note post supply for the incentive, as incentive to the distributor and dealer for achievement of milestone as agreed between supplier and recipient. So when he has raised the invoice for 100 and giving incentive of 10 rupees to the distributor and dealer to the buyer, to the extent of 10 rupees, it is not being paid by the distributor and dealer because credit note is being received. Can we allege this is short paid amount? If it is short paid, do we require to reverse ITC as per second proviso of section 16 subsection 2? Need not required. It is only adjustment, financial adjustment, accounting entry adjustment, and duly endorsed by Tamil Nadu AAA. In the case of MRF Limited, no reversal would be required in the hands of distributor and dealer who is a buyer, recipient of goods or services. Coming to the one of the important burning issue. We all know we are passing through COVID-19. Things are very difficult. Lot of us trade members are struggling with the financial cash crunch. Cash is not available. So maybe a case that due date which we are referring to. The second proviso says when buyer recipient fails to pay, word used fails to pay. So there is agreed date between both the parties, supplier and recipient. If buyer fails to pay, then only recipient buyer need to reverse credit along with interest. But what happened? If supplier and recipient comes together, renegotiate the terms and decide a fresh date mutually agreeable to both the parties, can we say it's a case of fails to pay? Sometime contract contain force majeure clause, and because of force majeure clause we have always a renegotiation for revision of due date. To my mind, if supplier and recipient both comes together, decide a fresh date, a new date, and this is agreeable to both the parties, then we can say there is no fails to pay. Hence, reversal of this GST input tax credit need not be required. And to endorse my view, what if this fails to pay? If supplier and recipient enter into a contract and invoice is being raised, let's say on 1st January 2020, assume hypothetically, and credit term agreed 1 year. Credit term agreed 1 year. So only after 1 year buyer has to pay. Buyer has to make the payment. Can we say there fails to pay? As per legal contract, credit term was given for 1 year and there is no fails to pay because both the parties had agreed for the credit term of 1 year. So I'm only throwing a light that this particular second provision of section 16 subsection 2 is hinting us due to COVID-19. If the payment is not being made for the known region to both the parties, why can't both supplier and recipient come together, renegotiate or negotiate a fresh date for payment? I'm of the view, in my humble opinion, then we can say there is no fails to pay. I given those arguments, but it would be better if government comes forward, and they have seen during COVID-19 lot of challenges, even for the compensation cess, center and state, the things, the way they are negotiating and discussing, and it is being stated COVID-19 is an act of God, none other than by Honorable Finance Minister. Why can't we clarify such issue? And I have seen that lot of notices are being issued only on this ground that the payment is not being made within 180 days and there fails to pay. Why can't we provide clarity when both the parties is agreeable, supplier and recipient, and they're deciding a new date, a fresh date? Then we can always say there's no fails to pay, no reversal required, no liability of interest. Business need to survive, and business will survive on agreed terms. So fails to pay only comes into the picture when supplier has given a date, recipient is bound to follow, and that is not being followed. So this is a summary on this particular second provision of section 16 subsection 2. Need clarity? If government authority watching my video, they may look into this subject matter, but I try to make it simple, good and simple. That's what we all are looking for. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Thank you very much.